An interesting clip included Jamie Lee Curtis that I recently saw somebody share. And she had said the problem was words no longer have any meaning. Words don't mean anything anymore. She gave an analogy with her black coffee mug that she was holding and saying that, you know, I'm going to say this is red and someone's going to agree with me it was red. And tomorrow people will all be saying it was a red mug. But it's obviously a black mug. And she used that to say, well, you know, words no longer have any meaning. But if you're listening to her, even though it's a video, but you're only listening to it like a podcast, like you might be listening to me now and not watching my expressions, then you wouldn't know if it was a red mug or a black mug, and you really wouldn't give a shit, would you? But to the point that she's making, words don't matter anymore. Words matter, absolutely. A great example of what she's failing to understand, and I'm going to use the example first so that I can take you down the primrose path with me. In the 1950s, War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells had this radio show, special, right? Like a movie on radio of War of the Worlds. And people that tuned in that did not realize that it was just a story ran around like chickens with their heads cut off, thinking we were actually being invaded. This is not a joke. That actually happened. People went nuts thinking War of the Worlds was actually a true invasion. The words had meaning. The words had the exact meaning that they were meant to have. But in the context of the person listening, they meant two very, very different things. If you knew you were listening to a story, you weren't running around like an idiot, freaking out. But if your neighbor came running over and saying we were invaded by aliens from outer space, you're looking at them going, it's just a radio show. Words still have meaning. It's the context and what someone's hearing. Now, if I tell you the meaning of a word and it's not the right meaning of the word, then we have a real problem, don't we? If I tell you this is this and that is that, then poof, right? We're going to have to talk about those words that you've been misled about, but we're going to have to understand why that misleading has worked. The words are not the problem. The words' actual meanings are not the problem. The real problem is what a friend of mine used to call courtroom theatrics. I have mentioned before that my family groomed me my entire life to grow up and become an attorney. I chose not to. But 2 decades plus, obviously I kind of always kept up with it even once I wasn't going to be one, right? And a friend of mine used to call it courtroom theatrics. Courtroom theatrics always will win the day. If I put on a really good show, PTM Bardem was the first one to say, sucker born every minute. And that's what we have here, courtroom theatrics. Back in 1950s, courtroom theatrics were often used in order to try and get an innocent person off, right? There are plenty of instances, even in the 1980s and 90s, where innocent men, minority men usually, these are the stories we get to hear about, where they are falsely accused. There's no evidence that they did the crime, but somebody swears up and down they saw them there and therefore they are guilty, right? And courtroom theatrics was if you have an innocent guy but you can't prove it and all the facts make him look guilty, courtroom theatrics. Maybe you can get him off with courtroom theatrics. Over the last 50 so years, that's kind of flipped over to being used to get guilty people off. Great example, Big Blue Dot of California. A young man had been stalking his victim, which was a misdemeanor crime. and only stepped up to a felony crime if he committed a felony. He not only then stalked this young woman, but then he drugged her. That is a felony crime. He then went on to follow her home and assault and batter her, beat her up and drag her behind a dumpster, a felony crime. He then proceeded to rape her and was caught in the act by 2 witnesses and held there until the police got there. Again, felony, rape. The courtroom theatrics that the defense attorney put on were basically not victim blaming, because that doesn't work as much anymore. Instead of victim blaming, the theatrics the lawyer put on were, oh, look how nice white boy he looks. He looks just like your best neighbor. Look at him. He looks great. And of course, the prosecutor, being that nice white person too, is like, the judge, the jury still guilty on all counts. The judge, however, he has a bright future. He committed 4 felony crimes. His bright future? He flushed that shit down the toilet when he decided to commit 4 felonies. But the judge and the courtroom theatrics, he just made a mistake. 4 felony crimes? Just a mistake? Judge apparently bought into the theatrics and gave him only 3 months. Well, he gave him 6, with 3 months off for good behavior. So it's not the words that are the problem. It's the theater that's the problem. The theatrics. The show must go on. I have said over and over that I'm thrilled. We are now a year into this, and I have almost 200 followers. And my goal was to have 60 at this point, so yay. But I have tracked groups that have started at the same time as me and since. There was one that started in June or July of this year. He's already got like 10,000 plus people. But he's clickbait, right? I get mad. You know I'm mad. I'm going to present these more calm going forward because I'm sick of the theatrics and I want you to be sick of the theatrics. And I want to have some credibility that I feel that all that clickbait isn't getting anymore. I'm not going to share other people's videos and stuff like that. That's not where we're going with this, period. I'm going to talk to you like we're sitting here talking, music playing in the background, sipping on our coffee or our tea. Maybe you want to sip on a beer. Some of these subjects are not going to be easy. And in 10-minute bites, as I've said before, change the format a little bit. And we're going to talk about words. And we're going to talk about what really matters. And we're going to talk about those things. And if I'm right, hopefully I am, most of you really want to know what we're talking about rather than just the theatrics. And most of you probably think that young man committed 4 felonies and probably should have gotten 3 or more years, at least a year for each felony. He didn't even get a month for each felony. Let that sink in. And that is all courtroom theatrics. It's time to put the theater aside because President-elect is absolutely one of the greatest showmen of all time. P.T. Barnum might just give him his hat. Suckers and losers. One born every minute. But if we're not suckers and losers, then we need to know and understand what we're talking about. And tomorrow and the next rest of this week, we're going to talk about words that matter. We're going to talk about socialism. We're going to talk about communism. And we're going to talk about capitalism so that you know what you're talking about. And you know what they're talking about. Peace.